As the vicious terrorists of ISIS continue to seize city after city in Iraq, Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in the country today, meeting with Prime Minister Maliki and discussing forming a new government. And, of course, this comes on the heels of President Obama announcing last week his plan for sending 300 military advisors to Iraq. But the bottom line is this: has the feckless Obama foreign policy in the region actually brought about this emboldening of terrorists in Iraq? Now, Senator Rand Paul over the weekend said he does not blame Obama for this, but we're going to get some thoughts now from former Congressman and retired military Colonel Allen West, who has some strategic imperatives of his own in Iraq. Colonel West is also author of Guardian of the Republic, wonderful book. And Colonel West, it's wonderful to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Janet.
What do you think of Senator Paul's remarks that he does not blame Barack Obama for what is currently occurring over in Iraq?
Well, I think that Senator Rand Paul, unfortunately, has shown that he does not understand that the most important title for the President of the United States of America is Commander-in-Chief. And when President Obama decided that he would make a campaign promise decision instead of a strategic vision decision and created an incredible vacuum there right in the heart of the Middle East and advertised that his new strategic, quote-unquote, was to pivot away from the Middle East, he emboldened all the enemies there in the Middle East, and quote unquote, he's supposed to have shifted to the Pacific, but he has not done anything there as China extends its regional hegemony. So I think that Senator Rand Paul probably, now that he's made that statement, might regret that he made it.
Well, right. I know that Dick Cheney actually had some remarks that would go quite against what Senator Paul had said, and for obvious reasons. But when you look back at the Iraq War, the beginning of the Iraq War under George W. Bush, all the decisions that went on leading to that decision and culminating with Barack Obama's decision to withdraw, what do you think could have guarded against this moment with ISIS being emboldened and taking over all these cities?
Well, it's very simple. And look, you're talking to a person that was there in Desert Shield, Desert Storm back in 1991. And also I came back later as a battalion commander in 2003. Two totally different ground operations. One was open desert warfare. The other one was more of a counter-insurgent, counter-terrorist operation. And we did have to adjust on the fly. But when General Austin, who at the time was the commander on the ground in Iraq, made the recommendation for a residual force of about 15,000, he laid out very simply the case for that. And we could have put those forces out along the Iraq-Syrian border, along the Iraq-Iranian border, and then up north to work with our best pro-Western, pro-American allies, the Kurds, and their Peshmerga army. And I don't think that you would have had what we see happening right now. You could have created an outer cordon and allowed the Iraqi army to get its feet under itself, and you would have been a bulwark there to keep al-Maliki from purging out the Sunni generals that we had well trained, and there was a very efficient army, and we could have continued to train those individuals. And for those people that say, how long will we have had to be there? Well, look at Germany, look at Japan, look at Korea. Even Bill Clinton said that we'd only be in the Balkans for 1 year, and we're still in the Balkans. Mm-hmm. So this is about people making hard choices and hard decisions. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton's book has shown that she is not capable of doing that, and showing a vision and talking about leadership and talking about the strategic imperatives to the American people.
Well, that's right. Now, what about the Prime Minister? Because there's been discussion about getting him to step down. What have you thought of his leadership and the ability of the Iraqis themselves to respond to ISIS?
Well, the first of all is al-Maliki is nothing more than a tool for Iran. I mean, he has aligned himself more so with his religious backing, being Shiite, than really being a leader and a prime minister of Iraq. And that was what the original words and verbiage that he used, he was supposed to have been. So when you had a military that had a ethnic type of balance with leadership and also down to the soldiers on the ground, when al-Maliki decided that he would purge that military leadership, that sent an incredible message. He replaced it with, basically his cronies, and we saw that army collapse, and you already had desertions. Then when you have a prime minister or a president that puts out a hit on his own vice president because he's Sunni, that lets you know that he is not there to try to govern, but to try to rule and align himself with the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world is Iran.
Yep.
And why would we want to go into negotiations or agreements or compromise with Iran is beyond me.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You've talked about, the fact that you don't want to engage in combat operations under this president. What should be done? We've got this 300 military advisors plan, and there's talk about getting a new government and so forth. People are weary of being in Iraq anyway. The U.S. people, the American people don't necessarily want to go back to Iraq fully the way we had before. What is the way forward? We've got to deal with ISIS. This is going to be dangerous for the United States. Ultimately, if we don't do something, what should we do?
Well, absolutely, and I really get tired, and I wholeheartedly reject this argument about the American people are tired of war.
Yeah.
Less than 1% of the American people are fighting. So I don't want to hear about the kid that's at Starbucks saying he's tired of fighting because he's not doing anything.
Right.
So let's get that out there first and foremost. What the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, our armed forces want is a clear and defined mission. I mean, right now, we have to go in and defeat this radical Islamic army. This is not just a terrorist organization, it's an army. We cannot allow them to establish this Islamic state, this caliphate, right there in the heart of the Middle East, because not only will they threaten all of the neighboring countries around and extend their hegemony, they're also going to export their terrorism. This is a repeat of the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan and inviting in Al-Qaeda. And this is an organization, ISIS, that was seen too radical even for Zawahiri and Al-Qaeda, so that gives you an idea. And we've seen these beheadings. We've seen these mass killings. I mean, this makes the killing fields of Pol Pot look like, child's play. But this is exactly what we knew would happen. And so now, in seizing these border crossings into Syria and border crossings into Jordan, they're not just threatening to do something in Iraq. They're threatening to do something all across this region.
Yeah,
and that affects our best ally in the Middle East, which is Israel.
Well, and an interesting point about ISIS is how much money they've got. I mean, they've been able to amass so much money. This is different than Al-Qaeda doing the fundraising and getting support from different states and different groups and different individuals. Mm-hmm. ISIS is just, like you say, it's an army more than Al-Qaeda was.
Absolutely. It is an army. It is seeking to have a defined caliphate, defined territorial stake and sovereignty under radical Sharia law. You have a country like Qatar that has been supporting them, and of course, Qatar is where we sent the 5 Taliban, senior members from Guantanamo Bay. But the thing is, we have to go in and contend with ISIS now in this infantile state before it gets entrenched, and then it becomes even harder to deal with. And this means a enemy-oriented military type operation. This is not about going in and rebuilding the Iraqi government or rebuilding their facilities. This is about finding this enemy and killing it. This is about annihilating this enemy and sending a clear message. But Janet, I think one of the questions that no one is asking is, why is the president so reticent and going in and fighting against an Islamist army when he used our military resource to provide support to an Islamist militias in Libya and basically destabilize that country?
That's a great question. It needs to be answered, and yet there aren't a lot of people in the mainstream media who are really pressing him on that.
No. Well, I mean, no one is. And so you have to wonder, why does the president, pick and choose to support the Muslim Brotherhood, but now he's upset with General al-Sisi, the current president, for cracking down on the Muslim Brotherhood? Why did he, support Islamist militias in Libya, but then he does not want to fight against an Islamist army in Iraq? Very, very perplexing hypocrisy here.
It sure is. So what would you advise? I mean, just from a military strategy standpoint, drone strikes, airstrikes, what sorts of things ought to be done militarily?
If it was President West sitting there, I'd pick up the phone and call the CENTCOM commander, who just happens to be General Austin now, and I knew him back when I was a young major at Fort Bragg. I'd say, General, this is what I want you to do. I want you to find this enemy with your intelligence gathering resources. I want you to fix him in place and not allow him to reposition. If he does move, I want you to kill him wherever he moves, to engage him with all your available weapons resources. I want you to destroy him in detail, and I want you to pursue him and to attack his assembly areas, his staging areas, his bases of operation. I want ISIS to be annihilated and decimated.
I love it. I wish you were there with your pen and your phone. That would be fantastic. I'd sleep better at night. But I mean, this is interesting. You had mentioned Mrs. Clinton before, Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton was the one who said, I believe last week, something along the lines of, oh, well, we're not really in danger in America. I mean, there's, especially about the 5 Taliban leaders in particular, it's not really a danger to America. Does there seem to be this pervasive idea that terrorists who are over there really just stay over there? I mean, post 9/11, it just seems unbelievable that somebody who is intelligent would make such a remark.
Well, yeah, that is one of the most naive comments that you could ever make, because these 5 Taliban leaders were working, a couple of them were working with al-Qaeda. And as I said, it was the Taliban that invited al-Qaeda in to have a base of operations so they could export their terrorist activities. And we saw what happened in the bombings of the embassies in Africa under her husband's watch. Yep. And we saw what happened on 9/11. So this is why we have to have people that are very serious about, protecting our country. The number one responsibility of the federal government is to provide for the common defense, and they have to do that very smartly, and they have to do that with, resolve and a forthrightness to it as well, and explain that to the American people that, we have to and confront this radical Islamic totalitarianism and this terrorist wing, or else, it will be here on our doorsteps. As a matter of fact, it already is here on our doorsteps and within our country, because I can guarantee you, with our porous borders, not everyone is coming across here are children and mothers to get into the United States of America.
Totally right. Well, and when you talk about the Islamist problem, the Islamist threat, the terrorist threat, this has been a government that has been very reluctant to ever talk about the I word, because they want us to perpetually think this is a great religion of peace. You guys are all Islamophobes, et cetera, et cetera. CNN says today that Secretary of State Kerry implored the Prime Minister to rise above sectarian motivations to become more inclusive and make the Iraqi government more representative of Iraq's population. Seems to me that that's kind of a sideline. Isn't the bigger crisis, let's get ISIS and wipe them out, as you said?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's interesting that the president says that this is Iraq's problem they have to deal with, and then we send John Kerry over there saying, please, will you please, be nice and play well with others in the little sandbox. We should be pounding ISIS, because as Kerry is sitting there pleading and begging al-Maliki, and I'm sure Iran is laughing at that, ISIS is taking more territory. They just took a major hydroelectric power dam up in the northern areas. They're trying to get oil refineries. They've taken border crossings. So, we're dithering, we're talking, and they're acting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's so important for people to get their heads around this, because, as you've mentioned, the danger to the United States is not remote. The danger to the United States is severe, especially if some of these jihadists who have gone over to Syria and are joining ISIS from the West come back home. Allen West with us. Thank you so much, Colonel West. It was wonderful to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure, Janet.
God bless you. And you can find more at allenbwest.com. We'll come back after this.